Good morning, all. Welcome to Sunday Morning Announcements with the Kathy Gray Avatar. If you're with us on Facebook or YouTube, please subscribe to get notifications when we have new videos. If you're with us on Zoom, drop us a hi in the chat. We'd love to say hello back. If you're with us in person, hello everybody here. And if this is your first visit, go ahead and sign the guest book either in the lobby or at oakcliffuu.org/guests. Today, we have a special guest in the pulpit, Silva Brave, who will be talking about important issues in the Indigenous community, such as the Indian Child Welfare Act, land rights, and missing and murdered Indigenous women. Please consider sticking around after the service for Talkback, where we gather in a circle and discuss the sermon and related topics. There's more. We also have our adult religious exploration class happening at the same time. Feel free to join Sarah Ricky in the Charity Building or on Zoom. Building Your Own Theology continues today with Eschatology, How Do We Account for Evil? And yes, I had to look up the definition and pronunciation. Today at 1 p.m., our church board will be meeting in the Hope Common Room and on Zoom. These meetings are open to all. Coming up this week, every Monday, our Widening the Circle of Concern work group meets at 3 p.m. on Zoom. If you would like to help us on our path to becoming an anti-racist church, please consider joining. And please see the weekly e-blast or the back of your order of service for information about plans to provide diversity, equity, and inclusion training for all new members. Your input is valuable. Please email your questions or comments to WCOC@oakcliffuu.org. There will be no Teamwork Tuesday this week, but it will be back on May 2nd. Next Sunday, Sarah Ricky will be in the pulpit to celebrate Beltane with a very popular UU tradition, the Flower Communion. Watch for more information in the e-blast. Not receiving the e-blast? Just go to oakcliffuu.org/e-news to sign up. That's it for now. I hope you have a great Sunday.
Welcome, everyone. It figures it's raining. Welcome to the UU Church of Oak Cliff. Here we gather in sanctuary where we're free to pursue our own unique and individual spiritual journeys in an atmosphere of acceptance, compassion, and celebration. We seek to build a community where you believe in is less important than how your beliefs guide and inform you and your participation in the world. Ours is a community that values the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. We welcome you. Repeat with me. May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our powers to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to bless and not to curse, to serve you, Spirit of love, compassion, and forgiveness.
Que esta luz que ahora encendemos nos inspire a usar nuestros dones y poderes para sanar y no para herir, para ayudar y no para impedir, para bendecir y no para maldecir, para servirte a ti, espíritu de amor, compasión y perdón.
The opening words are by Katie Romano Griff, invoking the past. Come, let us enter this space and community. Come, let us enter this space of hope and community with our sorrows, our joys, our passion, our compassion. Come, let us enter this space with the stories of our ancestors, for their strength and wisdom beats in our hearts. Come into this space, present to the beloved companions who move beside us. Come into this space, mindful that together we are building a future for other generations. Come into this space and let us worship.
Just as long as I have breath, I must answer yes to life. Though with pain I made my way, still with hope I meet each day. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to life. Just as long as vision lasts, I must answer yes to truth. In my dream and in my dark, always that elusive spark. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to truth. Just as long as my heart beats, I must answer yes to love. Disappointment pierced me through, still I kept on loving you. If they ask what I did best, tell them I said yes to love.
In our community, we make time each week to share pieces of our lives with one another, our joys and sorrows. We do this because each person in this community has value. Each person's experience matters. We share our sorrow with one another today, knowing that sorrow comes into each person's life, knowing that together we offer comfort. Please share your sorrows publicly by posting them in the Zoom chat or send them to our Facebook Messenger, or speak them aloud.
When I breathe in peace. When I breathe out love. When I breathe in peace. When I breathe out love.
We also share our joys with one another, knowing that this comes into all our lives, knowing that joy calls unto joy, knowing that together our voices rise in a chorus of celebration. Please share your joys publicly by posting them to Zoom chat or send those to our Facebook Messenger or speak them aloud. Ours is a covenantal church, Latin for come together. Covenant means a solemn agreement or promise from the heart regarding a course of action between parties. The practice of promising to walk together is the core of our faith. Simply put, it is a guide for the behavior we expect from ourselves and each other. We are bound together by the promises we make to one another, and we recite our covenant during every worship service. Please stand in body and spirit as we recite our covenant.
Because we love one another, we honor each individual's spiritual journey. Because we love one another, we celebrate life's abundance in service to each other, our community, and the world. Because we love one another, we connect with each other in love, respect, and acceptance. Thus do we covenant together. And now in Spanish. Porque nos amamos una al otro. Porque nos amamos una al otro, honoramos el viaje espiritual de cada individuo. Porque nos amamos una al otro, celebramos la abundancia de la vida en el servicio a entre sí, nuestra comunidad y el mundo. Porque nos amamos una al otro, ponemos en contacto a unos con otros en el amor, respeto y acepción. Así que hacemos pacto.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. Again, like she said, my name is Silva Brave. Ao mitakiapi, Stephen Silva Brave, Emencialo, Oi Shinshagu Lakota, Oyate. And so that's me introducing myself in Lakota as best as I can. I'm not even, a fraction of a percent of fluent speaker in it. I've learned how to introduce myself. And I'm saying, my name's Stephen Silva Brave, and I'm from the Shinshagu Lakota Nation. And in the United States, they would say that I'm a citizen of the Rosebud Sioux tribe. But we didn't name ourselves Rosebud Sioux. We didn't acknowledge ourselves as a tribe. But my family comes from Rosebud, South Dakota, in what's now called Rosebud, South Dakota. And so that's a little bit of what I'm going to talk about today is like, how do people from Rosebud, South Dakota end up in Dallas, Texas? What are you doing here? And so I'll get into that. But the first thing I want to do is start by getting a little off track when getting away from my notes, which is always good, right? When a speaker is going to start off just kind of going off the cuff. But I want to do that because I had actually never even heard of, this church, and I grew up in Oak Cliff, and I didn't know of, about it at all. And then when Bobbi called and invited me, she said, "Come speak to my church," and I'm thinking, I don't really do church, so much, and like what am I gonna do? Like I don't save souls. I don't, I don't. And she kind of explained, come, just talk about some of the activism that you do, some of the advocacy that could be helped with in the Native American community. And I thought, cool. So, over the last month or so, I, looked into it a little more, and then just being here today and seeing, starting off talking about sorrow, and we all have sorrow. And so for myself, this last year has been pretty good, but the year before was a mess, and a very difficult time. And I just want to acknowledge some people that I lost. I lost a good friend, David Ramirez. He was 38 years old, I believe, and he passed away from cirrhosis of the liver. He was actually sober when he passed away, but I guess the damage had been done for a while. And I just want to acknowledge him. I still carry a lot of sorrow for him. My best friend, his name is Jeff Abbott, committed suicide. And that is very hard to deal with when you say your best friend and you think, we were so close. I feel like I was someone that we could have deep conversations. I'm a counselor myself. I'm like, how did it happen? So I carry that sorrow all the time as well. And then the last one, which will lead perfectly into kind of where I'm going, is my grandma, Eleanor Brave. She passed away in December of 2021. She did have a relatively long life, especially for the lifespans of a American Indian woman. It was considered a long life, and she didn't have a wonderful life, honestly. But the end, I'm glad at the end she was happy and got to have happy years at the end. But it's not all sorrow. There's a lot of joy, and one thing that is bringing me joy right now is just being here and finding out there's places where people go and talk about being anti-racist without it being like a requirement in a course or something like that, and to know that there's meetings like this going on. And all week I was in different kind of settings that have given me a lot of hope and given me a lot of joy. Earlier in the week, I was in a meeting that had people from like the field of research and things like that, addiction counselors, and the Dallas Police Department coming together, talking about how they could all work together to help people with addiction, people with depression, with mental health issues and things like that, and sort of attacking it from all different angles, from the research-based level, from on the ground, working with people through counseling and things like that, and then officers actually wanting to be engaged in a positive way and doing help and not harm. And then yesterday we were at a community gathering of the American Indian community members here in the area, and we do a thing, we call it auntie time and uncle time, because aunties and uncles are very revered in most Native American cultures and most indigenous cultures. And we just get together, and the aunties get together and talk about whatever they want to talk about. And I have the honor of leading the guys in the uncle time, and we're just talking about what it means to be a good relative and things like that. And just that there are these things going on in the community, positive things, all the hate and things like that gets a lot more attention. There's a Proud Boy meeting, but there's a meeting of community members coming, talking about how we can help bring justice and equity and things like that. And then you all are meeting every week on that. And it's not a news story, though, and that there are the conferences like the conference I was at, and there's not news stories on that. So there's a lot going on to go against the hate. And that gives me joy, and that gives me hope. And thank you all for letting me be here. This has given me joy and hope. And so now, after 7 minutes, I'm into what I actually prepared. But yeah, so I'll start off with my grandma's story. Again, her name was is Eleanor Claire Brave, and she is from what's now called Rosebud, South Dakota. She grew up in what's now called St. Francis. That's the name of the town. She said when she was growing up, it didn't really have a name. It was part of the reservation. She said some people might say that it was Indian territory, Indian country. It didn't really have a name. But there was a church that was built there, and the church built a school. And the name of the church was the St. Francis Indian Mission. And so now the name of the city is St. Francis. I mean, the name of the little town is St. Francis. So when she was 5 years old, she actually went to that boarding school that was built there. And I don't know how much you all know about Native American boarding schools, but the way it worked was, so her father went to a boarding school too. When he went, there was no say in the matter. Like, they literally came and took your kids and said, hey, they have to go to a boarding school. By her generation, it was a choice, but her dad, her parents, my great-grandparents, were at odds of whether to send the kids to the boarding school or not. But the way that my grandpa saw was, you have to learn English, you have to learn about the United States, you have to, he felt like the Lakota and all other indigenous cultures were going to be gone, because that's what he was taught. And so even though she voluntarily went to boarding school, her and her siblings, which I also call my grandma and grandpas, that gets very confusing to people, but I guess they would be, in a non-Lakota way, be considered my great aunts and uncles, but they're also my grandma and grandpas. They all went to boarding school, but even though it was voluntary, they didn't get to come home at all on the weekends. They didn't get to have visitors. They're 8 months out of the year completely separated from their family, from their culture. My grandma only spoke Lakota. From the day you enter the school, you cannot. You have to start speaking English. You're physically abused for speaking your language. You also, siblings are separated. And, that's for, a reason. The reason I wear my hair long is because the young men were not able to wear their hair. First day, your hair is cut when you enter there. So the whole point of the residential boarding schools it was part of a philosophy that was known as kill the Indian, save the man. And that was the United States government, the Christians and Catholic churches. And basically what it's saying is, we can't keep warring with indigenous tribes forever. We can't keep killing them. They ran out of ways to justify it using the Bible. People were like, wait, this doesn't make sense. So they said, we'll still kill the Indian in the person, but we'll save them, right? Save their souls, basically. But just imagine, your 5-year-old, grandkid taken from their parents, never, they only see them a little bit of the year. And my grandma went through that. Not just her, almost every indigenous person from that time period went to the boarding schools. I would say probably 70%. And they say that today 100% of us we're all affected by it. I was on a panel a few days ago talking to medical students at the University of Texas Southwest, and we're all, American Indians. And each of us, it was either our grandma or our grandma, grandpa, or our parents who were part of that. And so my grandma went through that. Then the next thing was, when she was 18, she was part of another phase of the Kill the Indian, Save the Man, which was called the Indian Relocation Act. And so what that would do is, if you were considered a high-performing student, they would say, hey, we have this cool opportunity where you can move to a big city and you'll have a place to live, you'll be paid a certain amount each month, and you'll be given a job, and you'll have a chance to be a thriving American citizen. And so my grandma, she says that she felt like someone told her that she could go to the moon, that she had never, ever even left the reservation. Our reservation touches Nebraska. It's, the southernmost border of South Dakota. She had never even been to Nebraska. She never had money ever in her life. So they tell her, hey, you're going to go, you're going to have money, your own place to live. And they give her a choice of cities, and these were, relocation hubs, and Dallas, Texas was one of them. She said she never remembers why she chose Dallas. She chose Dallas, her and one classmate. They get on a bus, it's 900 something miles. She comes to Dallas, Texas. She says she remembers the first day that she came was the first time she had ever seen a black person. And the first time that she had ever seen a white person that wasn't a person of authority over her. Other than that, it had always been, either someone with the government or someone with the church or the school. And she was really, discombobulated, to say the least. And not to mention that was during the time of segregation. So when she comes here, she says she remembers at the bus stop, the whites only, water fountains, black only. And she's like, I guess I can't drink out of either of these. I'm not white. I'm not black. I have no idea what to do. And then she also didn't even know about Mexicans. And people assume that she's Mexican, and she speaks broken English because Lakota was her first language. And even though she learned English, she didn't speak it perfect. So forever, I seen it until she passed away. People would talk to her in Spanish, and when she would say she didn't know, people would think, yeah, right. Like, why are you acting like this? Why do you have this attitude? Because obviously you don't speak perfect English. You have to know Spanish. And so those are the struggles that my grandma dealt with. And that's how she ends up in Dallas, Texas. And when she got here, she found out that she was not ready. She took a job at Parkland. It lasted a very short period of time. She was told she was high performing in the boarding school system, which did not prepare people for the real world. When she was at Parkland, she found out she could barely read. She didn't know English as good as she thought. She didn't last there very long. The housing situation she was told she was going to be in was actually like a dorm living situation. They had to be out a certain amount of time. So very shortly, she gets into a relationship with the person who is my biological grandfather, but he was not a good man at all. He kept her in the house forever. She wasn't, allowed to work. She wasn't allowed to leave she said she had never took my dad or my uncle to school, not even kindergarten or first grade. She had never seen the school. They walked to school. This was the life that she lived, and it all starts with that boarding school experience. And so needless to say, as much as my grandma is probably my favorite person ever. But even she would admit it later in life, she wasn't a good mom. She ended up being a great grandma. She wasn't a good mom. She had no idea how to be a mom. She loved her parents, but she didn't get to be in the house with them every day experiencing what a loving household looked like. So how in the world could she mimic that with her kids? She didn't know anything but authority, and children are supposed to know their place, and that's how she raised my dad and my aunts and uncles. And when I was about 9 years old the first time that I went to South Dakota to be with my family. Something had clicked in my grandma and in my dad too. Say like, hey, let's go and let's go to go back to ceremonies. My dad remembered it when he was growing up. And when I was very, very young, we would go to South Dakota for like weddings and funerals, but never for ceremonies or anything like that. And we started going when I was 9 years old, and I had that little, that little bit of culture in me, and because before then I was just, I'm American, and I didn't know anything. I was 9 years old. We would go to Christian church sometimes, but not faithfully, or anything like that. I didn't have any beliefs. But this generational trauma for not just myself, for a lot of us, starts back with those experiences of boarding school relocation, not being able to be around parents. So you hear, Native Americans have a high rate of addiction, which is slightly true, but addiction, it's, in some years, if you're looking at percentages, it's higher for the Native American community. In some years, it's right on par with everyone else. Addiction affects every race, ethnicity, religion, part of the world, and it's been that way forever. People have been finding ways to self-medicate their pain forever. But if you look at why it affects us, it starts, probably all the way back with colonialism, but in a very real, tangible way with our parents going through that boarding school type situation, being relocated, being disconnected from their family. And so myself, when I was growing up here in Oak Cliff, I was involved in the things that a lot of kids are in Oak Cliff, and gangs and violence, and trying to just find a way to fit in. And when I was in high school, luckily, I didn't get in much trouble because I got involved in a Christian youth group, and I became like Pentecostal Christian youth, evangelical, all of that. And that lasted until I was 18 years old. I was actually going to school to be a preacher, and I got my girlfriend at the time pregnant, and that did not sit well with the church, of course, at all. And I remember when they found out, and again, I'm 18 years old at the time, and they tell us we have to get married, and we have to do it quick, and we can't have a big ceremony. She can't wear white, and then after that, we'll have to sit at the back of the church every time. And they called it being undisciplined. For me, it's like a shame. You're going to be publicly shamed. And so that day, we left, and I went and got drunk, and it was the first time that I had ever, I had tried, even as young as 11, 12, tried, marijuana and drink a beer and stuff like that. But it's the first time that I ever said, I'm so upset about something, I'm going to go and get drunk. And that kind of continued for me for many, many years. It led to a spiral. And I ended up, by the time I was 32 years old, I had cirrhosis of the liver. And I weighed over 300 pounds at the time. My eyes were yellow. My skin was yellow. We went to the hospital finally because my legs had become so swollen I couldn't fit on shoes anymore. And when I went to the emergency room, I was like, I know they're going to tell me I can't drink anymore. And they told me I couldn't drink anymore, but they also told me, like, you might not make it out of the hospital. You're dying here. And luckily, after 8 days, I got out. But when I was in there, one of the doctors told me, I know your story because I see it all the time. It's like, you're young, you feel really bad right now. You're gonna stop drinking. Maybe for a few weeks, maybe a few months, but you'll be back here in a few months, because when you drink again, you're going to get sick again. After you do that 2 or 3 times, you'll pass away. It's like, that's how this happens with young people in addiction. And I feel like, I was like, was he doing like a Jedi type trick on me or something? Or did he really feel that way from his experience? But either way, it made me say, I'm going to prove him wrong. I'm going to get sober, and I'm going to stay sober. And through a lot of different methods, 12-step groups, getting more in touch with my family and support system, things like that, I was actually able to get sober and stay sober. And it'll actually, next month will be 7 years since I, last had anything. Thank you. And so part of that journey was, at the same time I was diagnosed with cirrhosis. That was in May of 2016. In November, my grandma was diagnosed with lung cancer. And so I wasn't able to work because I was still recovering, and she needed someone to take her to her appointments, which is like a full-time job, taken to appointments at that point. And we really started to bond more than ever. And there was one time where I said, hey, because the whole time when I was deep in my addiction, I never went back to even visit my family in Rosebud, much less go to a ceremony or anything. And I said, this year, let's go to the ceremony and let's see what it's like. And that, from then on, really, really changed the whole trajectory of my life. I got reconnected with my culture. I got reconnected with a purpose in life. And my purpose is to help people who struggle with addiction, but it's even gone beyond that. It's to help the Native American community with the different things. And so, when my grandma passed a few years ago, I would hope that I've been able to carry her legacy even further. But some of the things that we have is, with the boarding school, we're seeking for, in Canada, they have truth and reconciliation, which basically means, the government has apologized and they offer ways to reconcile the relationship of people who were affected by the boarding school, which, again, I say would be 100% of American Indians, Native Americans. And just simple things like offering free mental health, healthcare is a thing, because we all struggle with that because of what happened to our parents and our grandparents. And then there's the Indian Child Welfare Act, which is another thing that's affected our community greatly. So that was passed in the 1970s. Before the Indian Child Welfare Act, many Native Americans would have kids, and basically at birth, they would get taken away and adopted out to a white family. And there was nothing you could do to fight it. And then even if that didn't happen, another thing that would happen is, they could find a reason. The CPS would find a reason. The house is dirty, or, well, they're living with their grandma instead of living with their mom. We need to take them away, and they would take them away. And so many of our people, and that still affects us to this day, because so many people didn't actually grow up with their parents, grow up with their culture, things like that. But in the 70s, the Indian Child Welfare Act was passed that said that whenever it comes to an American Indian child, to someone who's a citizen of a tribal nation, the first priority is to keep them with their family. So if it's not mom, then it's grandma, auntie, uncle, cousin. Second would be to at least keep them within their tribe. Then third would be to keep them, even if it's with another tribe, with another American Indian family. And then fourth would be, if all of those fails, then with the best situation possible, even if it's with a non-native. And that stood as, the law of the land here for 50 years. And it's been challenged many, many times, because people will say, oh, it's racist because you're giving preference to one group over another. But the things, that could be a whole, hour-long thing going into how that works. But it's a small way of reconciling what was happening. And it actually worked. It helped keep Native families together. It's not a perfect system. Some states are better at doing it than other states and following those rules, but it's kept families together. It's kept cultures intact. But now it's in the Supreme Court again, and there's a good chance that it'll fall this time finally, because the way that the Supreme Court is. And the people who are backing it, like the state of Texas, the state of Indiana, they don't care so much about adoption cases. They care about tribal nations being considered racial groups instead of political entities, right? Because each of I'm a part of the Shinshagu Lakota Nation. We have land rights. We have the right to, first adoptions of our kids who are up for adoptions, things like that. They want to say that that's giving racial preferences and see all of that in. The goal behind that for the state of Texas and the other states that are against it is so that then they can say not only do we not give them preferences in these adoption cases, they don't have land rights and things like that, which is really what they want, to be able to drill wherever they want, and for us to not be nuisances to them and to say, hey, you can't come onto our tribal land, or this is our land, and things like that. So that's another big thing going on in our community. And then another one, and that I'm very involved with, is missing and murdered Indigenous women. So we only make up 2% of the population in the United States, but we have a disproportionate amount of, and it's not just women, but of people who are victims of murder, kidnap, sex trafficking. And that would actually take, we would have to come here and meet for weeks to explain like why that happens. And we can talk about it later at the talk back a little more of why it's disproportionate. And actually one of the things I'm doing at UTA, and that it's also bringing me joy right now, is this week I get to defend my thesis, and it's on the MMIW and on the groups that are helping resolve that issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women. But, we have high rates of violence against our community members, and when people go missing, there's a less likely chance that they'll be found and things like that. And so that's another part of activism, is to help address that, help bring that to an end, And one thing that I believe that I'm taught in my culture is a concept of metaki oasin, which is very hard to translate to English. The best kind of that they do is to say we're all related, but it does mean that we're related, but it means so much more than that. It's, the tree out there is related. We're all, and, rocks, people all across the world, we're all related. And when you're related to someone, there's responsibility with that, right? It's our responsibility to help our relatives, and for our relatives to help us. And that's for myself. I don't necessarily believe in any higher power. The closest thing to a higher power is everything, all of us. And there's no one relative that necessarily is like the relative that can help you with anything. Everyone, everything, every creation has their things that they're great at, and then also there are things that, like, maybe they're not, trees can provide, oxygen, but they're not so great at giving a speech, or something like that, we all have, our different strengths and weaknesses, and we all can help each other, and that's one thing, I'm not necessarily up here asking for help, or, but they're saying, but we all need each other, and that's what I believe, and I'm grateful that there are allies out there, and that there are people who are willing to help our people. And I do, we talk about boarding school, ICWA, missing and murdered Indigenous. I don't want anyone to say, those poor people, those. We don't need any pity. We're extremely resilient. There has been actively, since the 1400s, a goal of stamping us out, and we're still here, and we're still strong, and we're still creating our own movements, creating our own music, culture, dance, contributing to society. So we don't need any pity. We're a prime example of resilience. And I guess that's just what I want to say today. Thank you for letting me be up here, and thank you for letting me share a little about my personal story, my people's story, and for just listening to me ramble on for 20 minutes. I appreciate it. Well, 30 minutes. Thank you.
Join me in reciting the Widening the Circle of Concern Covenant. We, the Unitarian Universalist Church of Oak Cliff, commit ourselves to the study and dismantling of racism and oppression within our congregation. We commit our congregation and ourselves to the work of anti-racism and anti-oppression. We commit ourselves to listening, to learning, and to action. When we fail, we commit ourselves to trying again and again. We covenant to begin this work and to continue until all of us can truly say that we are a beloved community of justice, equity, and compassion. Thank you.
All right. For our widening moment this week, I want to share a poem with you. This poem is by Kiakali Bordner, who is an Indigenous spiritual faith leader with the Unitarian Universalist Justice Ministry of California. Holy discomfort and holy disruption. I'm too much of myself, discomforting the privileged in the name of wholeness, in the name of holy discomfort, in the name of holy disruption. I'm too much of myself to be complicit. I know better. I lift my light. Shake loose the comforted, disrupt the stale status quo of harmful culture. I know better. Disrupt the stale status quo with words, with actions, some mumbled into my breathing, some simple as forgiveness, some hurled as curses and cries, some as complicated as love, some woven as tightly as a shield, some in community, some gentle as a prayer, some all on my own. I'm too much of myself. I bring my sharp edges, my holy anger, my holy love, for the interconnected holiness, wholeness of all. I disrupt the casual oppression, the covert slight, refuse the passive-aggressive deflection, refute the excuse of racist tradition. No discomfort of the oppressor matters here. Black lives matter here. Indigenous sovereignty matters here. The margins are the center here. I know better, I do better. Sometimes I build small bridges just so between people. Sometimes I draw closer two disconnected circles until their new Venn diagrams create community. Dismantle harmful cultures, allow evolution, provide for the discomforted, shine bright. You know better, be explicit. Together we are never too much. Disrupt in the name of holy wholeness, discomfort in the name of holy wholeness. Bring all of ourselves in the name of holy, of wholeness. Let there be an offering to sustain and strengthen this place, which is sacred to so many of us, a community of memory and of hope, for we are now the keepers of the dream. Members, if you're contributing cash towards your pledge, please use the envelope provided, write your name on it. To text your donation, see the number on your order of service. For more options, see www.oakcliffuu.org/donate.
From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live. De ti yo recibo, a ti te doy. Así compartimos y vivimos hoy. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live. De ti yo recibo, a ti te doy. Así compartimos y vivimos hoy.
Our closing words today are by Roddy Bell Shelton Biggs, The Pathway to Healing. Friends, thank you for your witness to all that exists on the margins. Thank you for your commitment to hold yourselves and one another in great and steadfast love. Moving toward from this place, may we continue to nurture spiritual growth. May we continue to travel along the winding pathway to healing from whatever brokenness we individually and collectively hold, knowing that we do not journey this path alone.
Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night.
We extinguish the flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Extinguimos esta llama, pero no la luz de la verdad, el calor de comunidad o el fuego de nuestro compromiso. Estos los llevaremos en el corazón hasta que estemos juntos otra vez.